But with that, I am going to call our last speaker, and is Natasha around? Okay, Natasha, I was going to start and say, now Natasha is known for, I hold her very dearly because she was my classmate when I did my diploma. So Natasha and myself go back a reasonably long way, and her stamp is till about 20 minutes before the presentation. She's still working on her computer, so that's why I was asking whether she's here. But so she did her PGD with me in 2007, and hence my special affection, for her. But Dr. Natasha is a molecular pathologist, and she has done her doctorate in infectious diseases from Imperial College of London. She is a consultant at the AKU University Hospital in the regional lab. Natasha has a skill, and that's her teaching ability of making very complex things, bringing it down to very concrete people, and I allude towards genetics. Now, I don't know how many clinicians here, our understanding of genetics is very minimal. The maximum becomes that, oh, it's familial, and that's the end of it. But she has this art of teaching where she actually comes down to the student and gets them to explain very complex things and highlights it in a very interesting manner. Natasha, I'm going to ask you to come and talk about your experience and journey through all these years.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So I'm what stands between lunch and Friday prayers. So I'm going to try and keep this to time. Dr. Bushra, I'm relying on you to raise 2 hands as I come close to the 20 minutes. So I just want to say how incredibly honored I am and what a privilege it is to be standing here today, because it's going to give me an opportunity to share my epic journey with CBEC. But also my epic journey about myself and learning about myself, learning about things that I didn't really understand, learning to think, which is really what Dr. Mosem, for new students, you'll actually come across her motto, which is, I'm not teaching you ethics, I'm teaching you how to think. So any journey has a couple of essential components, and I've listed them here. There might be some that you think are missing, on journeys that you've taken. But it's really important for me to go through each component over the next 15 minutes or so. So for me, I'd like to talk about the starting point of my journey with CBEC, the path that it's taken me on with its challenges, how I kind of have gotten to this podium today, the company that I have shared, not only with fellow students, but the faculty at CBEC, but also faculty coming in from other institutions and students coming in from Kenya. And that engagement in that company has been invaluable for me. And really, at the end, about the personal transformation that I have undergone. So it started for me with the Bioethics link, which is the CBEC newsletter. And it started in 2005. I don't think I have I don't have that slide. I think this is the older version of the presentation which I sent, and the last one that I was trying to make before Dr. Bushra actually called me. So I don't think that's the latest version, but it's okay, it's fine, I'll ad-lib. So in 2005, the issue of biolinks was actually sent to the CEO of Shaukat Khanum Hospital at the time, Dr. Faisal Sultan. And he was organizing a medical research society meeting, and we were looking for topics to talk about and to include in the program. And he sent me the newsletter. He said, oh, go through this newsletter. I think it's interesting. So the newsletter, the front page was an article by Dr. Paul Lombardo. And at the back, at the end, was an article by Dr. Amir Jafri. And it was an article about biomedical ethics in Pakistan. And it looked pretty interesting. I read it. It was very, very interesting, very well written. Dr. Amir is not in the audience, but it was very well written. And so I called him up. I called up CBEC, got through to speaking to him, and invited him to give this, a talk at this meeting. And it's really wonderful for me, so many years later, to be asked to write a piece for the same newsletter. And this is actually the anniversary issue. And I wrote an article, Just My Cup of Tea, Coffee, CBEC. So I think it highlighted the importance of communication and that also serendipity. You never know where a newsletter might take you. So where did it take me? The path that the newsletter took me on has actually transversed epic worlds. I don't know if the audience is very familiar, but on the extreme left is the wonderful yellow brick road that is very famous in The Wizard of Oz. And then we've got Alice in Wonderland, and then we've got Narnia at the end. So I've gone through all of these worlds in my own way. In 2007, when I started my PGD, I think I felt like I was in Oz, and there was this yellow brick road taking me to the wizard. It would take me back home. And I think it was a period of a lot of self-discovery and growth for me. I then found myself in Wonderland, navigating surreal challenges and shifting realities, which brings me to Narnia. And the dates I put deliberately, because the dates you'll relate to what was happening to me during this time. And in 2018, which is when I started my MBE, my master's, so I was a person who applied for the PGD, got into the PGD program, and then applied to the MBE and did get into the MBE program. So thank you very much, CBEC. But the MBE program really was a point where I realized my strengths, and that was a time of me maturing as an individual and as an academic. So my transition from merely just talking about genetics as a subject to it becoming, genome ethics becoming an area of interest for me was really the trajectory that it moved me from the PGD to the MBE. So the PGD, it was an incredible introduction to bioethics. It was an opportunity to delve deeper into my, learning sort of more eloquent, better bioethical academic language. And it also moved me a little out of my comfort zone of genomics into other subject areas, which I found fascinating. And it enabled me to then start to develop links between different subject areas and genomics. So one of the things that came out of the MBE was my research thesis, which really was, the title was Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, Who's the Most Ethical of Us All? And it was essentially looking into genetic studies that had been carried out in Pakistan, and it was a review sort of the content of these publications from Pakistan. And the reason that I felt that this was an area that I sort of decided to focus on was because during one of my sessions where I was invited to take a session on covering genome ethics for the PGD students, I shared a video, and I used to share lots of different tools and different ways of trying to explain, as Dr. Bushra alluded to earlier, different sort of different cases, different examples of why it was important to understand the ethical challenges around this new technology, the rapidly evolving field of genomics. And I used this one video, and I can never forget. I thought the video was amazing, and I thought it was just fantastic and emotional, and it made me cry. And I looked around, and every single person in that room was just sort of bewildered and wondering why I had shown them that video. And at the end, because after every presentation, as the students will soon find, even as a invited faculty teaching on the PGD course, you get a debriefing. And the debriefing is really something that it's very nerve-wracking, and it is you know, you kind of wish that it wouldn't happen, but it eventually does happen, and you have to sit there and literally listen to how your presentation went. There was too much, you covered too much material, it went on for too long, and you know, but they were amazing, because those feedback sessions really are the reason that I'm standing here today, and that I'm able to share how I've developed and evolved. Had it not been for those feedback sessions, I would naturally not have thought about doing this particular project. And the reason for starting this project was because every single member of the faculty at CBEC asked me, where is the context of Pakistan? Where are the examples from Pakistan? Where is the data? What can you tell me about what's happening in Pakistan? And I said, well, there's nothing. There is no data. And they said, well, go and get it. So that's what I did. So this thesis work was actually presented at the GFBR conference in 2019, which sort of led to me applying for a 4-week travel fellowship, which took me to the Ethox Centre at the University of Oxford. And that honestly was a lifelong dream for me, to be studying. Well, I wasn't really studying, it was just a 4-week fellowship, but I kind of pretended like I was at the University of Oxford for 4 weeks studying as a student. So it was wonderful. And I think the MBE research that I carried out, just to share a sort of like a snippet of it, it really was just a content analysis of publications from Pakistan related to genetic research. And I was looking at a number of different analytical categories: the author, the institution where the institutions involved in the research, the particular disease that was being studied, what sort of informed consent was mentioned, if not. And one very important thing was about the National Bioethics Committee approval. So, I found that the majority of publications and research was actually international collaborations, which sort of makes sense. Because again, the kind of funding that you need for genomic studies is huge. It costs a lot of money to do these kind of studies. So obviously that money is coming in internationally. However, is that a sign that I need to hurry up? So the idea was that, if we're doing all these international collaborations, we're kind of compromising on something, and we were compromising on the diseases that we actually needed to study. The most prevalent diseases were not the ones that were being actually researched or published. A lot of multi-institutional studies provided only 2 IRB approvals, and there was only one study that identified that actually had a National Bioethics Committee review approval. I don't think I can see all of my... Yeah, it's not the whole slide coming up here. Is that there's some things at the bottom which are missing? Can you just help me get this to... No, there's some... Is there a... Wait. Yeah, so it's actually, I think the format has changed, so we've got a few things off the... It's fine, it's okay. Can you just put it on screen? Thank you. Sorry about that. I think I'll just talk through it. But I also identified that there are responsibilities of stakeholders, such as the collaborating institutions and researchers, funding bodies, and publishers, in terms of, holding them accountable for the research that's done. So it sort of threw up a lot of ideas on how to try and continue and work further on this particular topic. So I did identify a number of areas that needed to be addressed. The most interesting thing was that the entire focus of current guidelines on any kind of ethical guideline is really on the integrity of the researcher. We're focusing on the virtues and relying on the researcher to actually do what we need them to do. And do we need to reframe to encompass pluriversality, solidarity, and subsidiarity? There are no regional guidelines at the moment in terms of carrying out genetic research in this particular region, nor in Pakistan, and maybe this is the time to develop them. We know that the institutions conducting genomic research, we know who the top 5 institutions are, and we need to engage more with researchers so that actually at the time of inception of a research idea, that is where you start planning and bringing in the ethical aspects and the engagement with patients and the engagement with the community. And this whole idea of engagement actually bore up another area of interest for me, which was, can we use genomic education as a catalyst for public engagement? And this is some work that I've actually carried out and I presented at the World Congress of Bioethics meeting in Doha in 2024. So I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues who actually contributed to a lot of the work that I'm going to share with you now. Dr. Amir, Swaliha, Maha Jafri from the Goethe Institute, Antonio May from the Edinburgh University, and the Beacon House National University, and students whom I taught but I learned so much from. So genomic education, it doesn't just involve teaching students. Genomic education needs to be there for clinicians, practitioners, researchers, patients, and the public. And this is really what I kind of focused on. So there are a number of ideas already out there. A lot of research has been done on looking at public awareness and understanding of genomics in other countries. And a number of themes have come out from this research. Link between genetics and health is not very well understood amongst the public, including concepts such as genetic susceptibility to conditions like cancer. The idea that multiple genetic components and the environment actually work together, as opposed to a single genetic variant being responsible for a disease, again, those concepts are not very clearly understood. So another very interesting theme that came out from work from Genomics England was that women and people who are older have a lower income and who have a lower income have less formal education and live in more rural areas tend to have less knowledge and awareness about genetics. So this got me to thinking about, well, what about our context? So genomics is rapidly moving from the lab to the clinics, and there's a high rate of genetic disorders in Pakistan. And that's kind of prompted a lot of interest in setting up genetic research studies. But from some of the work that, that I've started to do, the population is largely uninformed. We need to build trust from the onset, and it presents an opportunity for research and the community to work together, and from voices from our part of the world that can contribute to greater and broader global governance structures. So public engagement in Pakistan tends to be very didactic. या तो polls होते हैं, या कोई pamphlets ही होती है, public communication इस तरह से की जाती है. So I've just given you an example of how we tend to view public engagement in Pakistan, and I think this is a really, genomic education is a way to try and change that. So I did some work. This was actually presented by Swaliha a couple of years back, but we actually explored perceptions of human genome editing among students from Pakistan. And it was really interesting. A couple of very interesting themes came up. So we sort of asked them about prior knowledge about genome editing, therapeutic versus enhancement in terms of use of genomics, gene editing, editing germline cells, the safety, the justice, the slippery slope, tampering with nature, and the governance structure for genome editing. And some very interesting themes, viewpoints were discovered in this particular research. But as I'm running short of time, I'm going to quickly skip through. Another opportunity that I've had to actually engage in genomic education has been teaching undergraduate art students about genomics. But again, teaching them from the point of view of not the technical or the science of genetics, but sort of, trying to understand how genes are organized, how they work, in a broader sort of visual way in terms of how humans work, how humans are designed, and taking on the idea of design as a concept in art, and using those analogies. So that was an amazing experience, and I'm going to just show you some of the things that came out from that engagement. But another thing that I think that perhaps was the highlight of my teaching has been doing a genomics youth camp, which was sponsored by the Goethe Institute and was the idea of Maha Jafri. And here we ran a camp for high school students. And it was really kind of like the cross-section of doing, bringing together language, bringing together a biological language in terms of, genetics and how genes encode instructions for life, bringing together a communication language German, and then artificial intelligence, bringing together the language of the future. So it was a very, very interesting experience, and just showing you some photographs here of the kind of amazing things that these art students came up with. They came up with card games to explain genetic traits, or how chromosomes combine to sort of produce a particular genetic trait. They came up with humans of the future. So there's a picture here of a box with different body parts and different types of people on each face of the box, and they were just imagining what a future human being would look like, which was really, again, very fascinating. And this again is a sort of a jewelry, a student who was a jewelry major at the Beacon House National University. She came up with her own representation of a pedigree diagram. So she used different types of earrings to show, male, female, and it was just really, it was lovely. And then we had another young man actually look at generational differences by looking at different telephones. So you have an old age handset phone, and then you've got mobile phones at the bottom. So again, a very nice, conceptually, they view things in a very, very interesting way. Again, back and forth, we sort of asked them some questions at the end of their course. So I was just showing you some differences between art students and high school students about how they rated the course, had they heard about genomics before, had the course led them to a better understanding and the role of genomics in our everyday life, and a unanimous yes in both sets of students. And then did you discuss this course with family and friends? Because again, opening up the opportunity for this to go further beyond the classroom into homes as well. And again, a significant number of the students had actually spoken to people at home about genomics. This was a very interesting question, and I was actually a bit surprised about the distribution of the responses. So should we be able to enhance or improve certain traits and human characteristics to make better human beings? So that was an interesting response between high school students and art students. So the outcome was that, we identified a process that could work. So genomic education, designing a course that was not technical, but actually introduced students to the idea of genes and genomics. It could work. We ended up co-producing material that we could use for future programs, and students were very interested and engaged, and they communicated very well. It was very time-consuming. There were a lot of resources that were required, but we really created a collective, a regional contextual resource that can be used as engagement tools. So there are some uncharted territories. Genomics is rapidly moving from the lab to the clinics, and there's a high rate of, because of the high rate of genetic disorders in Pakistan. We need guidelines. We need guidelines for pathologists, physicians, and researchers. But more than guidelines, we need education. We need to actually design or develop tools that can be used by clinicians in clinics. And again, public perception, they are largely uninformed. We need to build trust, and it presents a lot of opportunity for the future. And just hot off the press, I mean, this is really, it's amazing. Just 2 days ago, there was an article in the New York Times that highlighted that the drug companies to share revenues with indigenous people. So for decades, one of the biggest concerns and challenges has been how we've been using communities and taking samples and doing genomic studies that have actually resulted in the development of particular drugs and benefits and a lot of funds for pharmaceutical companies, but communities haven't really benefited much. So this is a great example of the researcher himself actually putting this in as a core requirement when he started his study. And he involved the community from the very beginning, and it's a brilliant example to sort of be able to witness now that these things are beginning to happen, and it's great. It gives me a lot of hope and inspiration for work to be done in Pakistan. And again, just yesterday from the Hastings Centre, this report expanding the agenda for a more just genomics. And this report again talks about equity and talks about respecting rights and values of individuals and communities. But really that, genomic medicine needs to get to the people and it needs to be able to be beneficial and accessible. So it's a little bit of work that I really would like to do in the future. This is a project that I have in mind. And I think, we've heard about pluriversality, subsidiarity, and solidarity, and it really reminds me of a spider's web. And what I tried to do was, I really see from my own work, I've moved from actually looking at the global perspective to actually looking at local realities. And I've seen that transition very, very clearly in my own work. But I've also developed my own little spider's web, and I just think that, it's been incredible, the kind of linkages and support and the kind of people that I've been able to engage with and learn from, and who've supported me in generating and doing the work that I'm doing at the moment. So genome ethics in Pakistan is, it's not just a scientific issue. We need to develop meaningful ways within our own context, to sort of engage with not only students but healthcare professionals and the general public. And the aim is to make it a conversation about genomic ethics, but inclusive, accessible, and relevant to all sectors of society. Dr. Bushra is walking up, so I'm going to wind this up extremely quickly. And what is the need? We need to contextualize, we need to communicate, engage, and do a lot of advocacy. And this will help with developing a more sustainable policy, and we need to also build capacity. We need more people in genetics and the genetics field talking about ethical issues. So the company, second from last slide, which is more important, ask the big panda, the journey or the destination, and the tiny dragon said it's the company. So I have had the privilege of exchanging stories and experiences with my fellows. I've had the privilege that they have taught me not to judge a book by its cover. And really the guides that I've had on this journey, the mentors who've taught me about discipline, to trust myself and that I am valued. And that's huge. And so normally everyone who's perhaps been in my genome sessions knows this is one of the first slides that I start with, and today is the slide that I'm ending with. So I normally introduce DNA as the language of life, and it's deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. 4 letters, makes up 22 words, amino acids. The words together make sentences. We have 25,000 genes. It's the book of life. It has 23 chapters, 23 chromosomes, and there are billions of additions, the human genome. But it also is my acronym, Dr. Natasha Anwar. So I actually have learned so much about myself, and it's actually, this entire process has been about decoding myself. A molecular biologist, a teacher, a researcher, a practitioner. The PGD class of 2007 literally did change my life. My own understanding of my subject, my appreciation of it, the value and respect to participants and patients, and my context has changed. And it's really also about belonging somewhere and not being a misfit anymore, which is really what CBEC has given me, a sense of belonging. So I end with this small audio. So I have started and I will get through this journey eventually, so it's not the end. Thank you very much.